I started going to a church in downtown Tulsa that was different than the church I had grown up in. And it was there that I came to realize that it wasn't religion, it wasn't a denomination, but actually knowing Jesus meant that you had a relationship with him. So I kind of really stepped into that relationship, learning to talk to him, learning to trying to figure out my behavior, trying to figure out my future. I was still young. I'd only graduated high school in 1977. So going to church and getting involved in a drama ministry there, and also doing some like little mission things around town. I kind of started beseeching the Father and saying, okay, God, so what is it? Do you really have a purpose for me? Do you really have something that you want me to do? Am I here for a reason? And I was actually on Chandler Hill. I don't know if you remember, they used to have they used to do a play up there. And so there was I don't know, it was part of the mountain or something that they had sculpted out. And I was sitting in front of it in my car, and I had my Bible, and it was open to Isaiah 58 in the Bible. And I was talking and praying, and I looked down, and when I looked down one time, I saw that it was talking about that God wanted our whole hearts. He didn't want us to fast as in for show or something like that, but that we were doing it because we really wanted to believe that he was sovereign and holy, to have a relationship with him. And it also talks in there about taking care of the homeless and the poor, feeding the hungry, repairing the streets for people to dwell. And it was just kind of an overwhelming sensation. I didn't audibly hear God by any means, but sensation of that there is a future for you, and it'll be in ministry. And one of the things that God revealed to me when he told me I'd be in ministry along the line, he also said that I would never marry and I'd never have children. That seemed to be, I actually handled that better than some of the other things that he's called me to do since. And I also know that I could never do what I'm doing if I had a spouse and children. My cat gets really angry at me at times, pounding his paw on the table when I'm late, as usual. So fast forward, I went to California for a few years. I moved to North Carolina for a few years. I ended up working for a home for abused, neglected children in Wilmington, and met two amazing people who happened to be social workers. And they said, hey, why don't you go to college? And at the time I was 33 years old, and I was like, oh, you're kidding? That bus is passed. There's no way I can do that. But they were like, I really think that you've got the fit for being a social worker. So I did. I went to the University of North Carolina at Wilmington for 7 years, working on my basic studies and working full-time. And the counselor finally said, hey, if you keep going at it this way, you're never going to graduate, so you really need to go full-time. So I applied and was accepted to Meredith College in Raleigh, and earned my bachelor's of social work, and then went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill for my master's. And then at that point, God suggested that I move back to Tulsa. So I came back here, and I started working for a pediatric clinic. And at the time, it was the largest clinic for kids in the state of Oklahoma. And most of them were on Medicaid, which is the Sooner Care, which is the state Medicaid program. And so talking to some folks, and I actually talked to a mom, and she needed a breast pump. And so I said, okay, that shouldn't be a problem. So I called like 4 or 5 agencies. One said it would be a $150 deposit, then she would have to pay a monthly fee or a fee every week. And then there was one that said that they had a grant, but mom didn't meet the criteria. Another one is she had to write an essay, and then they would review it in a few weeks if they thought it was right. And I thought, this is just bull crap. I'm like, forget it. So I went to Babies R Us, I bought a breast pump, and I gave it to her and said, to the glory of God, lady, use this for you and your baby, and no worries about giving it back or anything like that. And So in essence, that was the very beginning of Isaiah 58 in his service. I was going to another church and was in a Sunday school class that happened to be, everyone happened to be about 20 to 30 years older than I. And they started giving me money and they started buying things and saying, oh my gosh, as I shared some of the stories of some of the people that I worked with, their eyes began to open just a little bit about the devastation of poverty and what it can do to families, especially children. So we started providing at that point. So from the time that God gave me Isaiah 58 in his service in 1979, which I didn't know that's what it was at the time, it was actually 31 years later when we incorporated in 2010 to become Isaiah 58 in his service, a nonprofit ministry. But these are the folks that I spend most of my time with. And I can tell you, I am more comfortable sitting, out in the heat, sweating, drinking a cup of coffee with some guys that are stoned out of their head or drunker than a skunk, or someone getting ready in the version or in the throes of having hallucinations and that sort of thing. I'm much more comfortable there than I am going to a middle-class church because so often the judgment is so high, and I probably shouldn't say this, but it makes it uncomfortable because what you see is what you get. What I wear today, what I'm wearing today, is what I wear all the time. I don't make any concessions, and I don't try to be someone that I'm not. And the goal for me is to be the kind of person that if you did see me, sitting on the wall after work, or seeing me in the clinic, or seeing me in church, those times, hopefully you're going to see the same person every time. So that's important to me, and I don't like the pretense sometimes of what we kind of expect people to do when they go to church. That should be the safest place for all of us to go and to fall apart and to be sinners and to be recognized as people that still need to be loved and should be loved. I could put you in my car and we could drive around Tulsa right now, and just in a 1 mile radius, I can show you 20 people that are struggling to survive. They've got physical illness, they've got mental illness, they're addicted to drugs, they have bed bugs, they have no air conditioning, flies are infesting the home. I can go on. So yes, I can go and visit all of these folks and do what I can to help, but we only can help when we have the finances to help. And we don't do fundraisers, and we don't take United Way money, and we don't take state or federal money, so we pray. And as we pray, we follow the Reverend Mueller's approach, which is a small group of us lift up a need and pray for God to provide. And most of the time, every need is met and we give him the glory. The problem is that the need is getting bigger. It's growing exponentially because a lot of the agencies too will only help in their zip code. So if you come to ask them for help and you don't live in their zip code, a lot of times they won't help you. Also, churches are going to a program, meaning you go and meet with a committee and you talk to them and you show them all your bills and they go, okay, what's your income and what's your outgo? Well, your outgo is bigger than your income, so we have to fix that. And so they try to help a family, budget and get on track, which for a lot of families, that's great. That works really well. But for the folks that I focus on, that we focus on with Isaiah 58 in his service, are those senior adults that live alone in their apartments, those folks that are mentally ill and on disability in apartment buildings, and we try to help those folks. And they'll never be self-sufficient, but it's scary, it's messy. Things don't always happen the way that you hope them to. Sometimes when you're trying to help someone, if they're having some problems with their mental illness because they haven't been on medication for a while, they could very well say something inappropriate, or they could swing an arm, or they could do all kinds of things. And sometimes that scares people, enough to where they don't want to participate again. Or come back, or they go back into helping in their church, which is safe and in a protected environment. It's not my ministry, it's his, and that we need to focus on doing what he's called us to do, which is making disciples and to sharing the love of Jesus with anybody and everybody that comes in our doors.